Hello friends, in today's session we are going to discuss the case of Harla versus State of Rajasthan. In this case, the constitutional validity of Section 7 of the Jaipur Opium Act 1923. The ruler of Jaipur has complete legislative and administrative powers, including the authority to enact and repeal laws. The Jaipur Laws Act 1923 was passed but was neither published nor brought to public notice. However, it recognized all existing and future laws. The trial court found Harla guilty of illegal opium trade under Section 7 of the Jaipur Opium Act 1923 and imposed a fine of Rs 50. The Rajasthan High Court upheld the decision, ruling that the mere passing of the law was sufficient for its validity. During the appeal to the Supreme Court, the key question was whether the publication of law is mandatory before its enforcement. The Supreme Court referred to the British Johnson versus Sargent 1918 case, where it was held the publication is an essential requirement for the enforcement of a law. Justice Maharaja and Bose opined that in the absence of a specific law or custom, it would be against the principle of natural justice to hold a person guilty for an act they were unaware of. The court emphasized that the laws must be published and made known to the public before enforcement. Additionally, the Supreme Court held that the Jaipur Council of Ministers, which had passed the Jaipur Opium Act 1923, did not have the legal authority to do so, as the act was never officially published. Consequently, the Supreme Court acquitted the appellant, overturned the conviction, and ordered a refund of the fine. This case established the legal principle that before the enforcement of any law, its publication is mandatory. Furthermore, no person can be held guilty for violating a law that was not duly published and brought to public knowledge. Friends, now let us study this case in details. Harla Petitioner versus State of Rajasthan Respondent. Reference AIR 1951 SC 467 case. The present case relates to Section 7 of the Jaipur Opium Act 1923. In this case, the constitutionality of the act has been challenged. Fact of the case: the ruler of Jaipur had absolute authority over governance, including the power to enact and repeal laws. On September 7, 1922, the reigning but disabled Maharaja passed away, and his successor was a minor at the time. During his minority, a crown representative appointed a council of ministers to oversee the government and administration of the state. On December 11, 1923, the Jaipur Council of Ministers passed the Jaipur Laws Act 1923. However, this act was neither published nor made known to the public. Under this act, all existing laws and regulations were recognized, and it was further provided that any future laws enacted would also be deemed valid. According to Section 3 of the Act, the Maharaja of Jaipur had absolute authority to legislate. The Act came into effect on November 1, 1924. Subsequently, on May 19, 1938, Section 1 of the Jaipur Opium Act 1923 was amended to include subsection C, which stipulated that the act would be considered effective from September 1, 1924. Trial court under Section 7 of the Jaipur Opium Act 1923 on October 8, 1948, the accused Harla was found guilty of illegal opium trade and was sentenced to a fine of rupees 50. High Court. The accused filed an appeal against the trial court's decision before the Rajasthan High Court. The High Court ruled that if the legislature had passed a proposal to enact an act or regulation, merely passing the proposal was sufficient for its validity. Consequently, the High Court upheld the trial court's decision and dismissed the appeal. Supreme Court. The appellant, after obtaining special leave under Article 136 of the Indian Constitution, filed an appeal before the Supreme Court. The key issue for consideration in this appeal was whether the publication of a law before its enactment is mandatory. To decide this question, the Supreme Court referred to the judgment of the King's Bench in Johnson vs. Sargent 1918, which held that publication of a law before its enforcement is an essential principle of natural justice. Justice Maharaja and Justice Bose expressed the view that in the absence of a specific law or established tradition, it would be against the principle of natural justice to hold a person guilty for an act of which they had no prior knowledge. The court clarified that before enforcing any law, it must be published to inform the public. Before the Supreme Court, it was argued that according to Section 3B of the Jaipur Laws Act 1923, the publication of all existing rules and laws was not mandatory at the time. Only those laws that were explicitly recognized under this act were considered valid, while proposals were not included within its scope. The Supreme Court ruled that the Council of Ministers, which had passed the Jaipur Opium Act 1923, did not have the authority to enact or legislate laws. Therefore, the court did not recognize this as a valid act, as it was merely a proposal and was never formally published. The court acquitted the appellant, quashed the charges, and ordered the refund of the fine amount. Legal principles established are propounded. Before the enactment of any law, it is mandatory to publish it in the official gazette, specifying the date of its enforcement. If a law is not properly published before its enforcement, no person can be held guilty for violating its provision. Please watch full video, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.